Effective immediately, I am banning Mr. Sterling for life from any association with the Clippers organization or the NBA. Mr. Sterling may not attend any NBA games or practices. He may not be present at any Clippers facility, and he may not participate in any business or player personnel decisions involving the team. He will also be barred from attending NBA Board of Governors meetings or participating in any other league activity. I am also fining Mr. Sterling $2.5 million, the maximum amount allowed under the NBA Constitution.
And it got worse. There, the new NBA Commissioner Adam Silver dropping the hammer with the toughest actions possible against Clippers owner Donald Sterling. This after, of course, that audio recording of him going off on a racist tirade was leaked online. Donald Sterling has yet to comment publicly on the NBA's decision over that audio recording. However, given his litigious past, we can safely assume that he will not go quietly into the good night. Now, people across the country applauding the decision of the NBA and the firm stance, and of course the biggest headline out of it came that he was going to be pressured into selling his team, and that 3/4 of the league owners would be brought to a call sooner than later on a vote. And per the Constitution, at least how it's been described by the NBA commissioner, if 3/4 of them support his move to remove him as an owner, there would then be an expedited sale. That all said, there are a host of questions attached to it, including some about what kind of a precedent may come out of this. Before the press conference yesterday, in fact, the eve before it, one of the owners, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban, while he certainly did not in any way sympathize with Mr. Sterling, he still sounded off about the situation and where it could maybe go from here.
Should we start taking steps to really condemn people for what they say in the privacy of their own home that just happens to be recorded? That's a slippery slope I don't want to get on. Again, in no uncertain terms am I supporting what Donald Sterling said or his position. He's obviously racist, he's obviously bigoted, and in this day and age, you know, when you're in the public eye, you've got to be damn careful. If that's your position, and that's unfortunately where you're at, you better be damn careful for what you say, even in the privacy of your home. But regardless of your background, regardless of the history that they have, if we're taking something somebody said in their homes and we're trying to turn it into something that leads to you being forced to divest a property in any way, shape, or form, that's not the United States of America, and I don't want to be part of that.
However, that same owner the following day after the press conference said he was, quote unquote, 100% behind Adam Silver, the commissioner, who said, and again, he was barred from all activity here. He was fined $2.5 million, which apparently is the max that can be fined, and he was immediately going to move to not let him have any more management role, but more than that, to sell the team here. And I brought a legal team because I got a whole bunch of questions for these guys. And let's go around the table. We got William Aronwald, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and he's at Aronwald and Pickett. And White Plains, Jim Kasouras, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, lectures at New York Law School, visiting professor at the University of Birmingham in England, and Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation. All right, guys. First of all, before I get into the law of it, I didn't think he was going to go as far as he did. And at the end of it, I thought he couldn't have done a better job than he did the commissioner. You guys agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically he did exactly what was expected of him. I think that he's going to.
Well, people thought there would be an indefinite suspension if you believed at least some of the internal media reports that were coming out, and a fine somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. And again, we're not privy to the details of the Constitution, but the idea that there'd be a movement to make him sell the team and, in effect, put the owners on notice to say, I basically canvassed them. I know I got the 3/4 votes.
Well, but see, that's the issue. The issue is that there's a substantial difference between lifetime suspension or banning him and from forcing him to forfeit his property right. And so I think what Cuban was saying was, look, you know, I support what Silver said, you know, in terms of what the penalty is, but what he's also saying is, he's not going to be in favor of forcing Sterling to sell his team. Because
But he then did a 180. 24 hours later, after Silver did his thing, he said, I agree 100% with what the commissioner just said, which is, I grant you, very different from what we heard the day prior, which was, where does it start and stop it? And I guess, Jimmy, I'll go with you. Is offensive language in private, or maybe it doesn't matter the setting, is that enough? And I guess we don't know this until we read the Constitution, the NBA's Constitution, that can get you to lose your team.
Well, and you're absolutely right. You see, this isn't a constitutional question. The Constitution protects you from government intrusion. There's no state action here. It's not the state depriving him of his right to free speech or his Fifth Amendment property rights. So it really is a contractual issue, and I have to say, as despicable as this language is, as despicable his racism is, to deprive him of this entire property right, which is what he's doing, irrespective of whether they vote him out, to not let him make any decisions with respect to the team, to not do what an owner does with respect to a team without any due process.
But just basic
anything.
law, isn't it that when you entered into it, it's like you're joining a club.
If that's what he
This
signed
is a
up for.
private club, and
Right.
you know you have to abide by, you're a charter member of the club, but you don't get to make the club's rules. The club says if you want to join, you don't have to join, but if you want to join, here's the fee and here's the rules. You don't abide by it if majority, or in this case 75% of the owners say no more. It's not like eminent domain, they take away the property. They just say, your property's going up for sale, take the highest bid here, and hasta la
If
vista.
that's what he signed up for, then that's what he signed up for. But that is quite a contract to be able to simply say you're out without an opportunity to be heard.
Doug, what was interesting also, and I want to get into maybe some of his options in a second, but what was interesting is they were going through some of the other owners. And while nobody has a notorious history as this guy in terms of with housing, and by this time most of you at home know the litany of things that Donald Sterling has either alleged to or even had some court action over, owner of the Orlando Magic has funded a lot of outside groups that have opposed not only gay rights, gay marriage, and some of those groups have used some really offensive language in terms of, I guess, the spread of AIDS. The owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, he has had his own challenges on some mortgage-related questions. He, the owner of Quicken Loans, Dan Gilbert. Is there a standard that comes out of this that's applicable now, or is it more like pornography, you know it when you see it? Like, we all agree where this guy went was terrible, but I talked on the set last night. If he said something about Muslims, let's say in 2004, would 3/4 of the owners found that offensive? Does it matter the ethnic group? Does it matter the setting? Where's the standard? Is there one?
Well, I think that's why you're going to have litigation. There are a set of rules that they're operating under, but what are those rules? This doesn't happen every day. So when they throw him out, well, he's going to have a right to say, listen, those rules that you're applying to me are arbitrary. It's against my rights, private, maybe even his constitutional rights as a U.S. citizen. So I think that's exactly why this is leading right down to litigation.
You guys have mentioned Constitution. Does the first Constitution that matters in this case the NBA Constitution, not the U.S. Constitution? It's like a private club. People can kick you out of a club. It may not be fair, but you signed up for it.
I think what you got to do is you got to take a step back and look at this. Look, first of all, whatever he said, and as horrendous as it is, as offensive as it is, he has the right to express his opinions, and what he said is not a crime.
But it doesn't have to be.
No,
Bill.
well, but we see we're all sitting here speculating as to what the NBA Constitution says and doesn't say. I doubt very much. Think of the precedent. I doubt very much that the NBA owners would go along with setting a precedent where an owner could be forced to sell his team and give up his property right simply because he says something that's unpopular. What Sterling did.
But think about this conversely, and anecdotally at least, we've heard of there's 30 clubs that they believe it's going to be either 29-0 here when it's done or something approaching it. If you allow a rogue owner to marginalize your product also, your brand is now tarnished. Think about the advertiser. You're impacted by this. The ratings, the headlines. You had last night if this thing wasn't resolved the way it was, we now learn that as many as 4 teams were going to walk off the court in prime time. You have television contracts and everything else. You have to, in effect, I think, grant this kind of authority, even though the commissioner works for the owners. Somebody's got to make the decision.
Look, I don't applaud what he said. And
I know you don't.
But what I'm saying is, for every action there's a reaction. I don't think what he said is going to ultimately tarnish the NBA brand or the NBA image. People who love basketball are still going to pay to see their teams play.
Bill, I don't know. I saw this thing rolling out here last night where it was going to get really ugly. And we already know, not only the Clippers weren't going to play, the Warriors going to work. We already now learned what happened. They're going to walk off the court if this guy got a punishment without any clarity. Now, I know we're heavy, but I want to ask some questions. And Jimmy, I'll start with you. How does this work this thing out? Because we know Mr. Sterling likes to sue, okay? Injunction, is that possibly the first step?
Well, that's what he's going to do. He is going, if he does choose to litigate, he is going to allege that this was a deprivation of his property right, and he's going to move in court to have the NBA enjoined from this punishment being put into effect until it's litigated. And he will claim that there's irreparable harm to him. He is an owner. He's got a right to manage his team. He's got a right to do everything that an owner does, especially a very involved owner. And he is going to move for an injunction if he litigates.
And then the question also becomes, Doug, he's not the only party impacted, I would guess. Now, I would say it's hard to argue, irreparable damage when the thing goes up for sale. They're going to assess the value. He's going to have a lower value of his franchise if he has any role attached to it. We already know that from advertising and everything else. So what happens to the wife and the kid and the other members of the Sterling family? I don't know how it's, the family attachment works in there, but does it get a little messy here when this thing gets unwound? Or is it just, here's the sale price, you guys figure out how you divvy it up?
I think it's impossible not to get messy. But valuations are done all the time in lawsuits. You bring in experts, they talk about what something the value is and how much it was affected.
But the irreparable harm is not necessarily determined by the finances. The irreparable harm is he wants to own his team. And by forcing him to sell it, even if he makes a windfall in terms of the money, it's irreparable harm because he's not able to enjoy his property right. That's the irreparable harm.
But it's not like he opened a store shop. He joined an existing entity in an organization and agreed to abide by their bylaws. And I'm making a leap here, but assuming Mr. Silver, who was a very smart attorney from before this, knew what those bylaws basically permitted and gave him latitude to do, Sterling knew, this is part of the deal. Now, I guess my question is, I know I got to go break. If Sterling's going to fight this beyond the injunction, I assume he's going to say that you've got, in effect, antitrust. Would that be his most compelling argument?
I don't think the antitrust aspect is going to enter into it. I think he's going to basically say that he's being deprived of a property right without being afforded due process.
And who decides to sell it? That's another question, right?
The Constitution, I think, provides that they can suspend him and fine him for making statements that are deleterious to the league. So the question then becomes, as Bill said before, how bad do the statements need to be? How do you define what's deleterious to the league? Why aren't those statements about gay marriage and gays and so on and so forth?
I guess my question, though, is if you're him or if you're his counsel, do you say, listen, at the end of the day, this isn't going to work for you, okay? So you're going to get the biggest number you're going to get if you get out now. The longer you drag the thing out, the value of the franchise is only going to go down.
No, if I'm his lawyer, I'm going to tell him that I think he's got a very substantial shot at winning.
And you can also bill him more that way.
What?
I think he's telling his lawyers what he wants to do. I don't think he's...
All right. When we come back, you've probably seen this case play out from Alabama yesterday. A convicted killer who was set to die from lethal injection ends up dying from a heart attack instead after a botched execution. Now the life of another inmate's been spared, at least temporarily. Our panel weighs in on both the justice and the ethics when we come back.